Choking the release of raw materials, buffer management, and a concerted effort to increase capacity at the CCR, if there is one, are all usually sufficient to bring the actual lead time through the plant down by at least 50%. But that's not all. Big improvements are still possible if we repeat our efforts to improve at the CCR by addressing other causes of delay to work orders as they move through the plant. For instance, in our little plant example on the slide, our CCR is still at Work Centre 6. The situation is transformed now as we have expanded the capacity we are able to access at the work centre by taking a number of simple actions. However, we may find that a resource upstream of the CCR or downstream causes the next highest level of delays to work orders flowing through the plant. This might be because the work centre is unreliable, for example, or frequently breaks down, or the process is poorly controlled, and this often results in defective parts. It may be that we don't have enough skilled workers, and those that we do have are late to work or frequently sick or just a bit variable in their performance. There can be many reasons. Whatever the reason is, though, once we've identified the issue, we can set about taking actions to improve the performance of this part of the system. And, just like at the CCR, flow through the plant will increase. As flow increases, manufacturing lead time comes down and due date performance improves too. Answering the question where to improve was easy when we had a CCR with a huge queue of work in front of it. But now we've gotten rid of the CCR queue, how do we focus our improvement efforts so that we get the biggest return on our investment of time and resource? As we've discussed before, there are literally millions of things we can improve in a plant, but which should we focus on? The answer lies in another aspect of the buffer management system. As work orders move through the buffer, they cross the buffer zones from green to yellow, yellow to red, and red to black. If we make a note of which queue they are waiting in as they cross into a new zone of the buffer, we can collect a representative sample of data and get an insight into where delays to flow are occurring. It's really important to remember that the buffer is a period of time, 15 days in the case of our little plant, and the clock is always ticking even if the work order isn't physically moving. As time ticks on, each work order progresses through its buffer, slowly moving through each of the zones until it is completed and delivered to the customer. If we make a note or use our production management system to record where the work order is each time it crosses into a new zone of the buffer, we can start to collect the data necessary to create a Pareto chart. The Pareto tells us which work centre has the greatest number of citations for work orders being physically present, waiting at that work centre as they cross into a new zone of the buffer. And the Pareto might look a bit like this. We note a citation each time a work order crosses into a new zone of the buffer. We collect the citations and organise them into a Pareto, putting the work centre with the most citations for orders penetrating the black zone first. It doesn't have to be a PhD standard statistical study. All we're interested in is getting a good enough idea of where we should be focusing our efforts. And it is really important to understand that it is just a focusing point for further investigation. We should not assume that Work Centre 6, the work centre with the most citations in this example, is under pressure and cannot keep up with demand. We should go to the work centre, observe, discuss with the people who actually work there, and find out why so many orders are crossing into the black zone at this point. The citations in the different zones for the same work centre also reveal something interesting about how the plant operates, and we can begin to infer some possible causes for delays in the plant. For example, if you look carefully at Work Centre 6 in this Pareto, and this isn't real data, I just created the chart for the purposes of this discussion, you can see that the number of work orders crossing into the red zone is high, as well as the number of black citations. So, in this particular instance, it is probably true to say that the work centre is, in fact, under pressure and would make a good focus of improvement. Another example is Work Centre 3, which presents a different picture. Many work orders cross from green to yellow at this point in the process. Given that Work Centre 3 is near the start of the manufacturing process, you'd probably want to know why so many orders are taking 1/3 of the buffer to get to the second operation in the process. Something to investigate at some point after we've tackled the issue at Work Centre 6. Also, the difference between the number of yellow and red citations at Work Centre 3 is quite large, suggesting that the Work Centre processes these work orders quite quickly once they are at Work Centre 3. A number of work orders cross their due date into the black zone at this point, certainly more than we would like, but is nowhere near as much as Work Centre 6. So in this example, Work Centre 6 is clearly where we need to focus next in order to understand more about how we can improve flow to the plant. And the process of ongoing improvement continues. But what happens next? Well, as we pursue the biggest causes of disruption to flow in the plant, we should see the number of work orders that are delivered late decrease each time we make an improvement to our processes, provided that is, it is an improvement to a process that causes orders to be delayed. If we don't see an improvement, we were working on the wrong thing. But assuming we are working on the right thing, over time we would expect to see the number of work orders in the red zone to decrease. This is not wishful thinking, it is a logical and predictable consequence of us following the process with sufficient rigour and effort. But why is this important? Well, a shorter lead time opens up the possibility of the business acquiring a new and decisive competitive edge that it can use to get considerably more business. If we can do this, we can start to charge a premium to customers who really need a rapid delivery service and value it so much that they are willing to pay extra for it. And if we can do this, we can dramatically change the financial fortunes of our company. Sounds good, but how do we get there? The answer lies in watching the number of work orders that get into the red zone over the course of a month. And when that number is approximately 5% of the total work orders in the plant, over the course of a month, this signals that the production lead time should be reduced by approximately 15%. We use 15% because it is a meaningful reduction in the production lead time and it changes the points in time at which work orders will transition from one zone of the buffer to another. Let's work this through as an example to understand this last statement. In our little plant, the production lead time is 15 days. This means that each zone of the buffer corresponds to 5 days. So, when a work order is released to production after the choke period, it spends the first 5 days of its time in the plant in the green zone of the buffer, from 6 to 10 days in the yellow zone, and days 11 to 15 in the red zone. When we reach the trigger point for reducing the production lead time by 15%, the production buffer is reduced by 2.25 days, which is 15% of 15. In a real implementation, we'd probably round this up or down to a whole number to simplify the calculations as to when the work orders should be released. Let's say we're feeling quite confident in this case, and we reduce the PLT by 3 days from 15 days to 12 days in total. What does this do to our buffer? Well, remember that each zone is a third of the buffer. Our new buffer is 12 days, so each zone of the buffer must be 4 days. That changes the transition points between the different zones. Green now transitions to yellow after 4 days instead of 5 as it previously was. Yellow now transitions to red at 8 days instead of at 10 days as it previously was, and the red to black and late at 12 days. We haven't actually done anything to increase the flow by changing the buffers, so the inevitable effect is that while the work orders continue to physically move through the plant at the same speed, they will move through the buffer more quickly, and this will increase the number of late orders. Now, this should only be a marginal difference to due date performance by this point, and coming after a period of sustained improvement, it should not affect our performance in the eyes of many customers. But the number of work orders in the red zone will also increase. This resets the process. The number of work orders in the red zone goes above 5%, and we continue to collect citations for our Pareto chart, answering the question, which resource is the work order waiting for when it crosses into a new zone in the buffer? The number of red and black citations increases with the shorter buffer, and this enables us to focus in on the area that will give us the biggest reduction in disruption to flow in the plant. Let's not shy away from the fact that it is likely to be more difficult to improve this time. The low-hanging fruit of easy improvements will be less plentiful, and real improvement will require careful analysis of root causes to be most effective and address the causes of delay that affect many orders. But with sufficient application, we can continue to improve our processes over time and with tangible results. Those tangible results being a reduced manufacturing lead time, which, as I said earlier, opens up the possibility of a new decisive competitive edge that enables the business to win more orders, potentially at premiums to the prices you currently charge. Sadly, this is beyond the scope of part 1, and I return to the topic in part 4 of On Time in Half the Time, where I explore the reliable rapid response Mafia offer and the inventory turns or make to availability Mafia offer in detail. Watch that video to learn more.